Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Scott Luton with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's episode. We've got a very special conversation teed up. We've got a couple of business leaders, podcasters, authors, entrepreneurs, and more with us right here, talking on a variety of topics to include the core topic of really tech for good and beyond. So stay tuned as we dive into a really fun, intriguing, and informational conversation. I want to welcome in the stars of our show here today. We have Theodora Lau and Bradley Limer, co-authors of the book, The Great Read, the best-selling, top of the charts read, Beyond Good, How Technology is Leading a Purpose-Driven Business. Theo, Bradley, how are we doing?
Very good. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Scott. Good to talk with you.
You bet, Bradley. Theo, we love repeat guests. And of course, we're friends, but we're also social friends. I'll tell you, I love your Twitter feed in particular. A lot of the great projects and thought leadership you put out there. And, last time you're with us, we talked a lot about Bradley Limer and this big project that was in the works. And of course, we had to remark pre-show, Theo and Bradley, I'm in love with Bradley's voice. I've got commercials and movie introductions, Bradley, we're going to sign you up for.
I think you're going to have to be my agent going forward. If you could represent both of us, I think we'd probably be better off. Let's go.
Well, we had Theo, great to see you again. And Bradley, we'll talk business maybe after today's show. But Theo, let's start with you. It had such a great time. That's been probably, I bet 4 months ago. Do you think
It's been a few months?
Yeah. Or maybe 40 ventures or projects ago for Theo. Ton of passion. I'm convinced you've got clones with everything you've got cooking, huh?
I might have little robots running around. You never know.
Well, so I thought we'd start today's episode a little bit different, right? Rather than do a rerun of our first conversation with Theo, I wanted to kind of reinvent our conversation a bit. So I'm going to drag out of the closet something we call the lightning round around here at Supply Chain Now. Are y'all game?
Perfect.
Okay. All right, we're going to get to the heavy hitting stuff on the front end here, such as food. So I want to start with you, Theo. What is your best meal, or at least one of the best meals you've ever had, and why?
Best meal in a restaurant called Masseria. Discovered it 6 years ago when it first opened. Beautiful tasting restaurant, small joint in the heart of DC. And that's been our family's favorite ever since then.
Ooh, love it. What's one dish that your family enjoys most there?
Ooh, I don't know. It's a tasting. So they do everything all over the place. Pasta.
Ooh.
Their pasta dishes are amazing. Yes.
Man, just with you saying that, I think I gained 7 pounds because I love pasta. So Bradley, same question for you. What's one of your favorite all-time meals and why?
I'm going to go back like almost 30 years because the first time I ever went to a place that was like a Michelin restaurant, I didn't grow up with a lot of money. My parents didn't take us out to this kind of place. And when I was maybe my last year at Cal, I went to a place with a girl that I was dating that I thought for sure I was going to end up marrying this girl. But we went down to LA, which is probably why I have a love-hate thing with LA. And we went to this Michelin restaurant, and it was like the first time I'd ever seen synchronized like serving and like little tiny like plates that just had amazing looking food on it. And that started this lifelong sort of love affair with food and going to fantastic restaurants around the world. So that kicked it off. And, the rest is history.
The rest is history. Love it. In LA, you're not talking Lower Alabama, right?
No. But, Lower Alabama, haven't been there. Lovely place.
It is. Hey, some of the best barbecue for sure. Okay. From food, I want to talk about resources now, right? We all produce a variety of content. We're going to talk more about this incredible book here momentarily, but let's talk about other folks, other content, whether it's news or commentary or analysis or just for fun. Theo, what's one thing that's on your either daily or weekly docket?
I read papers every day. So I'm probably one of the few people, weirdo, that still read papers. I do my round: Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, New York Times, and Washington Post. every single day.
Wow. Cover to cover.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, right? I think probably all of us would agree. News is news, and news are different and they're reported differently, depends on the person who's writing about it. And so you get different perspectives, left, right, middle. And, Financial Times is European focused. And so it's good to have different perspectives.
I can't agree more. Wonderful. I'm jealous. I thought I was doing something, reading a couple newspapers a week. I got to step up my game, Theo. All right. Same question for you, Bradley. What's on your daily or weekly docket?
I probably read 4 or 5 hours a day at least. And one of the things that though I read when I read slow, beyond like maybe some books, especially fiction books, when I read them slow, is Sunday New York Times. Like since I was like in high school, I would read for 2 or 3 hours of Sunday New York Times. And I grew up delivering papers, and I tell you, I can appreciate a big, thick Sunday paper, and I'll devour it like a good meal.
I love that. Well, speaking of a good newspapers, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, they're obituaries. Not to be morbid, but the storytelling and the research that goes into the ones they lead with, weekly or day or even daily, you can learn a ton, and it's so much more than some of your typical obituaries. I've learned a ton just by focusing on that aspect of the newspaper each week. On a much lighter note, much lighter note, as we were talking pre-show, for my family on the outskirts of Atlanta, we like to venture over to Monroe, Georgia, and take in the weekly farmers market, especially on Saturday mornings. Right, that is religious for us. It's therapeutic, and it's a big part of our routine. The kids aren't crazy about it most of the time, even though they get lemonade and treats and stuff, but hey, it is what it is. Theo, for you, what's a habit that's therapy for you as well, whether it's daily, weekly, or whatever?
Used to be.
Or used to be, or
I do see a farmers market pictures every weekend, and I get jealous. Before COVID hit, our weekend routine was brunch. We always go into town for brunch in downtown. And religiously every weekend, at least one brunch, if not two. The past year and a half, I don't know. We let the kids make breakfast. That's been our habits, which is great unto itself because they love to eat out, and now they just love to cook. The challenge is who does the cleaning.
I'm with you. That's like an age-old challenge too, right?
Yes.
My dear wife Amanda won't let me cook because of that important little afterthought.
Are you sure you're not doing it on purpose, though, Scott?
Well, I don't understand. Like, men should be doing as many dishes as everybody else.
You're right, Bradley. You're right. And Amanda, if you hear me, I agree with Bradley wholeheartedly. She's so much more of a culinary artist than I am. So Bradley, same question. So I love how Theo encourages her children to experiment and get creative and develop their culinary skills. What about you? What's daily or weekly therapeutic activities in your home?
I will say I actually love to cook, and I've ever since I went to Cal and learned how to cook different types of meals from around the world, I've always loved to cook. So I do like that. But I would say during the pandemic, I have had, even though I've had probably 7-8 years now working from home, more time to be able to work on myself. And so I probably work out an hour or two a day. And so I'm doing, 5 to 7 to 10 miles of running a day, and I have a rower and all this stuff. And that's my time. And with the kids, they take every other minute of every time. So between that and the book and work, I tell you, you got to take care of yourself too.
You sure do.
I'm trying to add up your hours, Brad. So 2 hours rolling and running, and then 4 hours reading. Wait, Do you sleep?
Yeah, no, not too much sleep. And like you, I could say that, you have to stretch to get more than those 24 hours a day.
I am working to get back into running. I don't know how I used to do half. I can't do it anymore.
There's not enough hours in a day. There really isn't.
Enough. Nope.
But somehow we find a way. And Bradley, I agree. I think it's important. And Theo, I want to say you and I touched on this in your first episode with us. Taking care of yourself. It's tough to help others if we don't take care of our, if we don't take care of ourselves first in some way, shape, or form. Okay. So I appreciate both of y'all's indulging me with the not so lightning round. I want to move to your professional journeys. Theo, We had a lot of fun talking about your background and your professional journey last time. For some of our listeners that maybe hadn't caught that episode recently, let's start with you. Give us a refresher. Give us a couple of previous roles that really helped shape your worldview.
Yes, I'll make it brief. So I was an accidental engineer, did it out of spite, worked, great, wonderful, proved it, moved on. Spent most of my life actually in telecom, in various aspects of telecom, including with a couple of clients in Georgia, where you are, Scott. And started with landline. I don't know who still uses landline, but we had those. And then CLEC and wireless and high speed, all of that. And then kids happened. So took a turn and moved on and did a couple of startups. After that, went on to nonprofit. And then the rest was history. That was where I met Bradley when I was working in nonprofit, looking at financial innovation for older adults.
I love that. We did talk about that last time. And, one interesting thing, this is obviously supply chain now, and most of our episodes are really centered on supply chain, but I've always found it to be the whole fintech space and how it's overlapping more and more with global supply chain. I find that fascinating. So I think this would be a really neat, if not creative episode here at Supply Chain Now. Bradley, same question for you. Give us, so you're new to our listeners.
Yeah.
Let's walk through your professional journey a little bit, same way.
Yeah, well, I've been in financial services almost my entire career. I started out 7-8 years doing the data side, working with banks and sort of leveraging their data to do marketing efforts around insurance and other products. And, I feel bad about that early part of my career because I probably killed about 1 billion trees with the direct mail that we did. So outside of that, I dove into working in financial institutions themselves, first in a credit union and ran marketing and technology for them for many, many years, and then a community bank, which was a 100-year-old bank here in the Bay Area, and learned an awful lot between those two institutions about what it means to serve and what it means to be part of that community. Then I, started getting into working with startups across that time and into fintech before it was fintech, and ended up leading innovation at Banco Santander, which is this monstrous global entity in 20 different regions with 160 million customers. And
wow.
There's a lot to play with and a lot of fun. And then, through that process, met Theo, and the rest is history in terms of, the book and what we do and all the work and all the good we're trying to do in the ecosystem. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay.
Drag you to the dark side. Just don't call him a banker, Scott.
No,
I don't think anybody wants to be called a banker necessarily.
Well, so this will be interesting. So Theo, you're in DC, right? Bradley, you're in San Francisco, and I'm in Atlanta. And as both y'all probably know a lot better than I do, the Atlanta area, I think its nickname is FinTech Alley, if I've got that right, because of all the trends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and Visa just announced that they're coming down with a lot more people, and it's always been a fintech hub for FIS and Fiserv and so many others.
Very interesting. Okay. So I want to better understand, and I bet our listeners will find this interesting. I mean, y'all collaborate on more than just the book. And again, the book we're referencing today, and we're going to talk more about here momentarily, is Beyond Good: How Technology is Leading a Purpose-Driven Business Revolution. How did y'all meet?
Let me go back in history. So
we need a whiteboard.
We need a whiteboard. So there's this little Theo in this giant, monstrous nonprofit trying to figure out, okay, what is this fintech thing? First of all, what is fintech? And how can we use it for older people? There's so much buzz. And so what did I do? I went and Googled fintech. And then I went onto social media and searched for fintech. And there came something called Fintech Mafia.
Okay.
I remember that. And so a couple of names popped up. The first one was Bradley Limer. Okay, don't know who he is. Sent him a LinkedIn email. He actually responded. That was quite interesting. Make a long story short, met a bunch of people in my first Finovate, which Brad would call the fintech of Disneyland.
Okay.
Disneyland of
the
fintech.
Disneyland
Let's get
of
that
fintech.
correct.
Right. See, that's why I love him. Anyway, so I was there, this little person who does not know anyone, and everyone seemed to know everyone. And this person just dashed across in front of me. He was walking. He was in a hurry. He's always in a hurry going somewhere. And I'm like, oh, hey, Brad. And he stopped and looked at me. He's like, who are you? And I held up my lanyard. I'm like, oh, I'm Theo. We traded some correspondence. And his first thing he asked me, Brad, I don't know if you still remember, are you drinking from the fire hose or something?
Well, and if you were at Finovate or anything else like that, or, at those early days, that's what it was. It was like drinking the fire hose of information. And just to see, dozens and dozens of startups in those earlier days and what has become of it. It's now like the hottest part of venture capital globally is fintech.
Is. Yep. It is amazing. Now, Brad, I don't know if I should tell Scott about like what happened afterwards. So remember the coffee meeting?
Yeah. You could go ahead and tell that story. I'm sure their listeners will be appreciative of it.
I think Scott would like it. So fate would have turned out completely different. So we met for coffee afterwards. And at that time it was because I was looking for banks to partner with us on a hackathon. Just, looking, hey, anyone, would want to be part of this. Now, Mr. Limer is used to talking to people who asked him for money because, banks, people go to him for money. And so I met him. And before I even opened my mouth and start talking about why I wanted to do a hackathon for fintech solutions for older adults, his first reaction was, I can't sponsor you. That was your second strike, my friend, because I wasn't looking for money. We had funding. We were perfectly fine. We were like $1 billion nonprofit.
Wow.
But we did not need the funding. I just needed someone to work with me. But yes, that was Mr. Lima in a nutshell. But that's how we met.
But let's take it from there. In terms of working together and in terms of helping you with hackathons and everything else, I was there. So I actually personally will always do more than what the brand I'm associated with at any given time.
You were not there on the first hackathon. You were there on the second one.
I came and I helped as much as I could.
Not
and
the
I will
first
say,
one.
but
nope,
you're
not the first one.
Okay, maybe not the first one because of course I couldn't sponsor. But in terms of the influence from that first meeting and what she took from her experience at ARP and what that has changed in my mindset about that demographic and how we serve people, that influence has continued for years. And so, regardless of how that started, I think the impact will continue for a long, long time. Yeah, that.
Excellent point. I got one follow-up question and one follow-up comment. Love for y'all to speak to before we start talking about Eureka moments. First off, Theo, you mentioned a hackathon, and there may be a portion of our listening audience that are new to that, what that is. Can you briefly describe it?
Yeah, so we did two, actually. It was loads of fun. The first one we did it in New York. And the whole idea is we wanted to get people to start thinking about why it is important to innovate for older adults, right? Because all of us who are involved in one shape or form with innovation, you have your typical bias of people who will be doing it and people you will be doing it for, right? And people don't normally think about, people that are older than 50 that need a digital solution for anything. And so that was the first idea of we wanted to get people to start thinking about it and change their mindset. And then the second one is, it's the best way to get new ideas is to reach into the community, right? Reach into people that are grandchildren, people that are adult children, working with their parents and whatnot, or people that are going through the journey itself. So that was our idea was to partner with as many communities as possible to see what challenges they're facing, right? And how they think would be the best way to solve it. And we did it in a way that we wanted to bring in banks. Because at the end of the day, guess what? As much as many fintech solutions are out there, a lot of us still bank with the Main Street Bank, right? Mm-hmm. And we also wanted to change the mindset of people that are working in traditional financial services to understand that there is a market to be had to innovate for older adults, because it's a market opportunity of trillions of dollars. We're all living longer and we still need services.
Right. Mm-hmm. I think based on some of what you shared there, I think it's some great takeaways for our global supply chain practitioners listening. Going outside of your typical regular channels for ideas and go ahead, Bradley.
Just adding in there,
Yeah.
the idea of a supply chain related hackathon. When you think about, some of the companies we invested in at Santander, we spent a lot of time on working through digitizing letters of credit and just different ways that the supply chain could be more optimized. And in working with our small businesses and our large providers, the Cargills of the world, the big providers in the supply chain, we learned that in doing something like a hackathon, there are going to be smaller startups working on pieces that could improve the entire system of the way that people get paid, things get shipped, how things like blockchain technology and other things can prove authenticity across the supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. And so you never know, in working with smaller companies, what's going to be sort of come out of that. And I think between the two of us working within the brands that we've associated with and also, working with clients along the side, there's always something that can be discerned from it.
Well put. And on a related note, you mentioned earlier, Bradley, how fintech's one of the hottest spaces when it comes to venture capital and entrepreneurialism and whatnot. It also happens to coincide at a time when the procurement profession has got a seat at the table, perhaps unlike ever before. It's a really fascinating time, and I think where those things kind of overlap and are woven in with each other, I think that's where there's a ton of lessons to be learned and takeaways that are relevant in global business just as much as relevant in global supply chain. Okay, so we're about to fintech geek or supply chain geek out there, and I'm gonna pull us back from the edge for a second because I want to one of my favorite things from Theo's last appearance with us, we talked pre-show about it, was one of her eureka moments she shared, and I can't remember where the line is from a song, the line that the kids are okay. That was one of the main things she shared, during this pandemic, as we all are fearful about how it impacts our kids, right? And continue to be, at least from where I sit, anxious about that. That was one of Theo's, your lessons learned. The kids are okay and they're navigating well. And they're in some cases, they're thriving despite all the challenges. And that's a beautiful thing. But starting with you, Theo, I can't wait to hear your latest eureka moment that you've had. So share what else has hit you like a ton of bricks here lately?
I need sleep. but in all honesty, I think the last time when we both chat, that was when the kids were still at home,
right?
Virtual classes, and as of a few weeks ago, they finally are back in school, and it's bittersweet moment because they finally get to meet their friends face to face, which I think they really need, right? Because humans are social animals and we need each other. And even though, the three of us are talking and connecting through the screens, it's not the same. So there's that. But I think finally it's to the point where I would like to say we're slowly adjusting to how life is, or likely will be for a while. And so now I realized I need to take care of myself. So I need to sleep. Sorry, it's not like this like earth-shattering moment or smart thoughts that I could share, but it's literally what I feel right now as I can finally breathe.
I think it's really important. I think and kind of expounding a bit, mental health, the need to invest in ourselves, and the need to be physically and strong and mentally strong, and so that we can parent, and so we can lead businesses and startups and all these great initiatives during these crazy times. So I appreciate you sharing that, Theo. And Bradley, I'll come to you next. What's been a eureka moment for you?
No, I think the last 18, 19 months have proven out that people are pretty resilient. We've been through, globally, an awful lot with this pandemic, and I think it's proven to people that people can be very productive at home. Those that are fortunate to be able to be working from home, and I hope that there's a little bit more empathy that people have for those that aren't able to work from home. It's a privilege to be able to work, from the comfort of your home when so many people can't, and there's so much economic divide that we confront every single day within this industry. And if we aren't building solutions to help people be more resilient financially, then what are we doing? You know, why do we have a financial services industry unless we're serving the communities and every person within the community that we have an opportunity to serve? So there's an awful lot, I think, of learnings, but we're an awful resilient species of humanity here. So lots that we can improve upon, but you know, we'll be okay.
Well said. And it is interesting how the prevailing definition of luxury has continued to change, because you're right, working from home and being able to still make a similar living, you know, without any of those trade-offs, it certainly is a luxury. So well said there, Bradley. Okay. So Theo and Bradley, now that we've kind of set the table, you know, we've talked about some of the characters we have here. We've talked about some of the professional journeys and the context there. And then of course, we've kind of brought it current with some recent lessons learned. I want to dive in to this book that is, I think it's number 2 on my queue of what I'm reading next. And I want to start with how it originated. And Theo, I'll start with you. How did it originate, and proverbially, what was your why, you and Bradley's why for doing it?
We like to tell people that we like to torture ourselves, but it was a serendipity moment, I'd say. A publisher reached out from the UK, and this was 2019, pre-pandemic. We all met in London in December, and we decided on the framework of the book, because both of us, as Bradley had told you pre-show, we've been writing quite a bit for the last few years, and, you know, and on a very, very regular basis. And so the thought was, well, how about we continue that on, but, you know, have it in the shape of a book and talk about some of the ideas and extend it through stories around the world. One of the things that resonated with both of us a lot when we talked about privilege earlier is it's a privilege to have a voice. It is a privilege to have a platform, to be able to do what we do, and to have the opportunity to talk to so many people around the world and listen to their stories is a privilege unto itself, which is not something that everyone has. And so we wanted to use the platform that we have, be it a written medium or be it podcast and what have you, to bring their stories out so we can all learn from each other. So that was one of the foundational bases of why we wanted to write the book. And so made a long story short, we started writing end of 2018, early 2020, before the pandemic hit. And at that time, our worries was, how would we be able to reach out to everyone we wanted to include in the book, to have all the voices included in the book, and yet be able to keep up with all of our travel demands and speaking engagements and all of that. Well, I guess we all knew what happened after.
Well, so really quick, Theo, because some of what you shared there, also we talked about in your first appearance, and clearly you're aligned with Bradley, where you want, especially those voices that aren't regularly heard, you want to spotlight that and spotlight their POV, their point of view, and their expertise, and what they're thinking. That I love that about y'all's approach here, Theo.
It's that was actually how we founded the company, right? It's that there's talent everywhere. Throughout both of our corporate lives, we keep running into amazing people. I kept running into amazing founders, and they just could not get access to the network. They could not get access to the banks. They could not get access to capital because of where they are, because of who they are, because of where they went to school or not went to school. And that's not right? You know, to be able to meet how our world will be in the future, especially given all of the challenges that we have, we need all the ideas that we can get from different corners of the world, because there's nothing better than lived experiences, right? People that are from demographics that we want to create solutions for. Is not our job to be prescriptive of what they need, but it is our job to listen to them and then help them and get those ideas on the table.
Beautifully said. And folks, for my fellow supply chain related founders and entrepreneurs, that's got to be, hopefully it's singing in your ears, because there's opportunity for all, thanks to leaders like these two here. And we got more work to do for sure, as I'm sure they can attest to. But I love that this dynamic that's growing in entrepreneurial circles across the globe right now. Bradley, what else would you add when it comes to the book's origin and your why for doing it and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, one of the connections that Theo had for me was with the mid-year, um, and Flourish Ventures is what they're called now. And we did a report that came out probably 6, 8 months before we started writing the book that really highlighted good business models within fintech and financial services globally. And these were companies that a Media Network and Flourish had invested in. A Media person who founded eBay. And so, they are really looking at how you could improve financial inclusion. And in meeting some of the companies that they highlighted and sitting on stage at places like Money 2020 to highlight their stories really had an impact in the way that I think we both felt about, who a founder should be and why we need more representation, than just your typical white male young founder that looks like Zuckerberg. Because the average entrepreneur in fintech is 42 years old, has worked in financial services, and actually sees where the holes are. And there's a lot of holes inside banking that banks still miss to this day. And so to me, the book and what we worked on within it was to point out a lot of those sort of missing opportunities, not just with who we serve, but just the way we serve people and the end result. And so our feedback thus far has been really, really positive about people kind of rethinking the way that they think about this business.
Love that. So you're both kind of speaking to some degree to some degree of my next question. That is, why should folks sit down and read it? And now I'm partial already because Theo told me to. I'm kidding. But I really, when you follow folks on social media and see thought leadership, you see what they point out and you get a sense of who they are and what they're passionate about. It was an easy decision for me, right, to add it to my collection, my reading rotation. But Theo, beyond what y'all have already shared, why should folks pick up the book and give it a read?
Because we are all part of the world today, and our kids and the next generations are going to be a part of the world in the future. So, given what we have collectively learned in the last year and a half, if that did not prompt us to look for ways to change, what would?
Well said. Bradley, what would be your...
Well, yeah. So for your listeners, there's actually a section on supply chain.
Hey, how about that?
And there's seriously like a lot of examples about good supply chains and how companies can actually be part of Beyond Good. And so we talk about it in the context of system leadership and how, leaders at the largest to the smallest corporations have choices. They have choices in who they use as suppliers. They have choices in the way that their supply chain has an impact, from an ESG sort of standpoint in terms of looking at the environmental and social impact of what they do and who they work with. And if more people at the, heads of corporations, regardless of size, think about their supply chain, even if they don't think about it in terms of a manufacturer supply chain, they think about goods and services from the employees to their partners to their customers a little bit differently. And we think about how that all works together in the bigger, broader picture. I think, that is a lesson that carries across not just supply chain networks, but across every single business model that exists.
I'm with you. And I love that. So folks, there's lots of supply chain in this book. You got to check it out. And again, going back to our earlier elements, supply chain financial executives are the folks that have a lot of juice and a lot of power. And there's also lots of opportunity there. So whether you're global supply chain or global business, y'all check it out. And I love the title alone, because good isn't enough in these days, right? It makes me think, when I first saw the title, it made me think of one of my first favorite business books, which is Good to Great, right, by Jim Collins, which I love kind of how he and maybe he's got some colors, I don't know, how they approach that as business cases and examples and stories. So I'm looking forward to giving this a read as well. So again, Beyond Good, how technology is leading a purpose-driven business revolution. And I would just add, supply chain and global supply chain leadership and know-how and action is what's going to help address some of the leading challenges and issues of our time. And that's really cool. We talked about procurement having a seat at the table for perhaps the most ever, supply chain also. There's a reason why we're seeing chief supply chain officers crop up left and right. And as Greg White always says, and I got to get y'all connected to Greg, we'd have a really fun conversation. Now that we've got a seat at the table, that's good news. But the bad news is we got to act like it. We got to take action, right? Okay, so no shortage of ammunition in terms of why to pick up the book. Theo, let's talk about your favorite part of the book.
Ooh, too many. I think that one favorite thing I like the most about the book is we were able to squeeze in a lot of quotes from a lot of founders and entrepreneurs around the world. That bit was really important to us, so important that we actually cut off 10,000 words, and Brad is still crying. But we were told we had too many words and too many pages, and so we decided to cut off our words so that we could keep others' words in there, because that is one important bit of why we wanted to do it, right? Like I said in the first place, we want to include voices of others in what we do. And so if you go through the book, you'll see lots of quotes from, founders of various ages, from different demographics, from various parts of the world doing different things. And we want to get them in there. So that's my favorite part.
I love that. And that resonates with me as being I'm talking all the time too much, right? And one of my favorite parts about what we do is stealing a page out of your book. You give the mic, you give the spotlight, you give your own podium to others, and gosh, to cut 10,000 of your own words to protect those voices across the globe. I love that, Theo. I'm gonna be sharing that with my family this weekend. All right, so Bradley, that's gonna be tough to top. But what's one of your favorite parts of the book?
I don't know. I'm still crying about the words that are missing.
Hey, you got a head start on part 2, though, right?
All right, there you go. We're going to start with those words.
I
would say that the first thing that I wrote as part of this book was a story around Lego and the history of how Lego started and the tragedy of factory fires, and talk about supply chain disruptions. I mean, when your entire factory burns down to the ground 3 different times, and yet you still now have the single largest, most profitable toy company in the world. And you think about, how Lego started. So that's how the book starts. And that was the first set of words that I started out with. And I think the key to all this is that we end with that as well, the story of Lego and what they're doing now and how they're changing their supply chain and how they're changing the way that they look at manufacturing. And it's about hope in the end. And so it starts with hope and it ends with hope. And that's the message that we want to get across to everybody, is that change is in the mix, change is happening now, and everybody can be part of it.
I love that. Theo, I want to, maybe it was you and I talking about this last time, because hope came up. I believe it could have been someone else. But on that note, I grew up in South Carolina, where our state motto is Dum Spiro Spiro. And I'm probably getting the Latin wrong there, but it's while I breathe, I hope. And it has been imprinted in my brain since being a kid, because without hope, gosh, especially during your most challenging days, what do you got, So I love that, Bradley. This has got to be, and I have, I can't say I've rubbed elbows with a ton of authors, but gosh, the sense of purpose that I'm picking up between both of y'all of writing this book is really heavy. I mean, it really is. And I mean, heavy meaning full, I guess. It wasn't, let's start with business and what folks should know. It's like you had, both of y'all are really sharing a very deliberate purpose for really beyond the information you share, how you write the book and how you're really pulling people together. Is that Theo? Is that right?
Yeah. That was a chapter in the very beginning that we pulled out too, Brad. Remember that? Our personal stories that we wanted to share background about us that lead us to the journey where we are. That part we had to take out, unfortunately. But it was very personal. So if you thought, what you read in the book now is personal, that is like, it adds a ton to it. I talked about my mother, where she grew up when I was born and raised in Hong Kong, but my parents, they both, they were born during war times, right? Post-war. And my mother's family, especially, they were refugees and they escaped and they settled in Hong Kong, but they lost everything. And so it was a lot about my mother growing up and giving up a lot of things just so that, the rest of her younger siblings could have the life that the family wanted them to have. But in the course of that, it also changed how my mother's career trajectory, or she ended up doing something else that she didn't want to. At the same time, in parallel, my dad was in a similar story, and the two of them ended up meeting, but how their life experiences impacted how I think about people who don't have enough, how our attitude towards others that are in less fortunate situation, and how each and every single one of us have the responsibility to help lift each other up. I think that part of it, and my mother especially, impacted the work that I've been doing, and even now, right, on what we're doing and why we want to do it. So that was the part that cut out. That was really personal. And Brad, you had a similar story on Nebraska too.
The regeneration, or the ability to sort of change your trajectory, is what I think I had written about. And in my family, my dad moved from Nebraska to California when he was 17 or 18, and changed the life that he led, and changed the life of what my mother led. And my father-in-law moved from Mexico and came to work in California, and changed the trajectory of his family going forward. And if we could personally change by decisions that we make, then corporations and businesses of all sizes can change when people make decisions that are better for themselves, but they change the lives of other people. And so I think what we ended up writing about was about that ability for people to improve the lots of others, and how small things at the time add up to be very, very big things, much like, this Lego piece where a little brick can be turned into almost anything. And just really quick, the reason why we called the book Beyond Good was actually something that you had alluded to with Jim Collins' book, Good Great. We thought that, even though it was almost 30 years ago that this book came out, even more now, I think 40 maybe almost, we talked about the book and what it meant, because a lot of what he defined as great was around profitability, and was around productivity, and was around efficiency. And we actually think that businesses should be gauged and judged in a different way. And that's why we said it's not good to great. Let's start with good and purpose and go beyond that. And so this is a revolution that hasn't started with us, and it won't end with us, but it's happening.
I love that. Pros with a purpose comes to mind. And I also love how it doesn't start with y'all and it doesn't end with y'all, but both of you, via this book and other things you're doing, are adding fuel to the fire and bringing more momentum to this movement and the revolution you're talking about. So folks, y'all got me ready to run through the wall back behind me. This is really good stuff. Let's make sure, and also we'll be tuning, we'll be ready for part 2, because it seems like what y'all left out would be a wonderful core or beginning to the follow-on piece. Let's make sure folks know how to get it. So I went to, I like to diversify where I get my e-commerce so that it's not all going to one place. And I went to a different bookseller, got it, and still got it in the time I needed it, right? Less than a week is fine. It's like getting a pair of socks. I don't need a pair of socks same day. I can wait a few days. But Theo, where would you suggest folks go get the book?
So we actually have a site for it, beyondgoodbook.com, and it has links to, if you're overseas, Waterstones, or if you're domestic overseas, you can go to the big retailer. But we also love it when folks go visit the local bookstores, independent bookstores. That's always our favorite. So bookshop.org. And anywhere books are sold.
Love it. And in the last time, and just getting this scheduled, which was a couple months in the making, it seems like the book has really resonated with a bunch of folks, interviews and webinars and keynotes and all kind of stuff. Is that right, Bradley?
We are here to have this message get to as many people as we can. And I think, again, this is not just our message. This is the message of the 100+ companies and the dozens and dozens of people that we share within this book, and we're privileged enough to talk about. So it's a collective message.
I love that. It takes a village for sure. All right. So now one of my favorite questions I'm going to ask y'all today is there's so many aspiring, really, let's call it content publishers. Some are looking to publish that first book, and it's like the moving target. Others are maybe thinking about, they just can't, they want to be a podcaster and they can't get started, or they want to be a keynote speaker and they can't get started. But maybe with a focus on book writing, or really whatever y'all prefer, what's some advice? And Theo, I want to start with you. What's some advice you'd offer those aspiring thought leaders?
I think the first thing I'd say is listen. Listen to what others are saying. Listen to what's going on around you. Observe. And if you have some ideas, just write it down. Doesn't matter if it's like 20 words or 50 words, 100 words, and start building it up.
Brick by Lego brick. I love that, Theo. All right.
Yes.
Bradley, what would your advice be?
I do love that, to listen to others. I think consume as much information as you can and develop your own voice. I think I don't know how many people, in the last 10 or 20 years I've said to, but just start to write, start to speak, start to have a voice, start to realize that regardless of where you think you are in an organization, there's always a need to hear you and to hear what your message is. No one should be silent.
Gosh, I love that. Y'all are quite a one-two punch. I would just add to that, even if you can't wrap your head all the way around it, that confidence journey, we all have different paths there. But if you're listening to this, know that you have a voice and it's important and folks want to hear from you. So even if you just begin to embrace that, that's fine. But just know that and act on it. Okay, so I want to broaden out. So really appreciate y'all sharing a lot about the book and a lot about the movement behind the book and a lot about your approach there. Let's broaden things out. So Theo, when you pulse the global business environment right now, no shortage of topics, COVID related, non-COVID related. What's one, whether it's a news development or an innovation or a leadership example, whatever it is, what's one thing that's got your attention more than others right now?
I think data sovereignty is one thing that's been on and is growing, and it's actually worrying in a bit. If you start thinking about how a lot of the technology, regardless of industry you're in, the underlying technology infrastructure was created and has been created to facilitate information transfer, data transfer, or emerging technology using AI and what have you, you need a massive amount of data and a lot of collaboration across borders, right? That is needed to make it thrive and to make it better. And unfortunately, I think what I worry and what I see is that we're going the opposite direction, where, countries start setting up walls and say, well, my data stays here, it doesn't go out. Or, one country not playing nicely with the other country and thereby, eroding the trust that humans need for businesses to survive. I think that is the one trend I've been observing, that I hope it will go a different way. And we need it to, right? But yeah, that's on my radar.
Data sovereignty, man. We're going to have to set up a whole series dedicated to that. I got to learn a lot more about that. Hey, Bradley, what about you? What's one thing that you're tracking more than others right now?
Yeah, I mean, we talk in the book a lot about data and how companies are using it and the rights and wrongs of personalization and everything else. And so there's just so much in there. But I will say that one of the things that I think we'll probably be writing a lot more about in the coming year or two is both embedded business models and the power of platforms. And just, to say that your business model is something that could be easily switched over and taken over by someone else. And we think about the power of, Amazon and large platforms and changing the way that, things are procured and changing the way that supply chains are changed over the last couple of years. Think about, drop shipments and think about how many small businesses have changed because now almost anybody could start a business that starts to ship a lot of stuff around the world. And man, don't ever say that your business can never be disrupted, because there's nothing right now that ain't being disrupted.
You're absolutely right. I can't think of one sector that doesn't have new ideas or new challengers or innovations that are changing how things have always been done or how they have been being done now, or even that short-term horizon is evolving fast and furiously, right? It's tough to keep It's tough to keep tabs on it all. So maybe I need to read 7 newspapers a week like Theo, and we'll make some progress there. Okay. So we're coming to an end here, and I really appreciate y'all's time. As busy as y'all are, appreciate what you've shared here today. Folks, make sure you check out beyondgoodbook.com. Get your order, get your copy of the book, and then some. But let's make sure folks know how to connect with both of y'all. So whether it's Unconventional Ventures, the podcast, other projects y'all have got cooking. Theo, let's start with you. How can folks connect with you?
So I am on social. So I'm on Twitter, PSB_DC, or in LinkedIn. Theodore Lau, do visit our podcast, One Vision. We are going to be celebrating 150 episodes soon, and super proud to say that half of our guests so far are women, and friends from LGBTQ community, as well as people from communities of color. So that is the one thing that is super important to us as we invite guests to come on our show to talk about different experiences. So do check us out, and we very much appreciate your support, Scott.
Oh, you bet. I love it. I love that deliberate aspect of what you do, and giving the microphone to folks that oftentimes don't have it, and amplifying that voice. And, I also enjoy as I mentioned, your Twitter feed, especially every once in a while you throw a new Lego project on there, Theo, and that's really cool. So keep that coming. All right. So Bradley, same question. How can folks connect with you?
Yeah. So email bradley@unconventionalventures.com. Of course, our corporate website, unconventionalventures.com. And Twitter, probably the best place. It's @Leimer, LEIMER.
It's just that easy. It is just that easy. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. I've got my 18 pages of notes. I've got my homework assignment. I think Theo said there's going to be a quiz. So I welcome that, hopefully multiple choice. And if I'm confused, I always go with C. That was a rule of thumb in college, at least for me. Really appreciate both of y'all's time on a more serious note. Gosh, it feels like you are just scratching the surface with the first book, especially with what you want to do, what you want to share, and who you want to uplift, and the topics you want to cover. So we're fully expecting a mini series. I'm trying to think of the last elementary or the last series of books. I'm thinking Laura Ingalls Wilder had a series of books. I think not Willy Wonka. There was Beverly Cleary had a series of books, right? So many stories to share. Well, Theo and Bradley, I think y'all both have a full series up your sleeve. So, but just be kind and considerate as I deliver my book report on the first one. Okay. Is that a deal? Is that a deal?
That's okay. A deal. Thank you.
Thanks Scott. So much.
Always answer C. Always answer C.
Always. Oh, what a fun conversation. Theodore Lau and Bradley Leimer, co-authors of the book. Again, go check it out. Beyond Good, How Technology is Leading a Purpose-Driven Business. And there is dump trucks of purpose right here between these two, truckloads full. And again, you can check out the book at beyondgoodbook.com. Folks, hopefully you enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Yes, it was not a core supply chain episode, but hey, we got to broaden things out, right? We got to get more well-rounded as supply chain professionals and practitioners. And this episode, I think, serves in that purpose. Hey, check us out at supplychainnow.com. Check us out wherever you get your podcasts. But most importantly, hey, be like Theo and Bradley. Do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And on that note, we see you right back here next time on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com, and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.